Hi, I'm Aeon in this video. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to more talking about things that have happened. We all know what has gone down over the past few days. There's been a huge hacking scandal with SpaceUK admitting, or not admitting, I don't want to call it admitting because he would never have admitted to it otherwise. He was caught hacking every single level he has beaten basically ever. I think it has been proven that it beat Valkyrie legitimately. That's about it. So I would call this the largest scale hacking scandal we have ever seen in this game. I do not want to talk about that, however. There is nothing I can say in a million years that hasn't already been said by 1,000 other people. I do not want to shine light on space as a whole. What I want to talk about today is the impact of space hacking. What I mean by this is that me and Volcanium, we have compiled chronological timeline of everything and everyone that was robbed and stolen from by space. This is something that is very dear to me personally. I have a lot of passion for this community, and I have a lot of passion for the playing community and its trust and integrity as a legitimate competitive game. So I want to talk about a few things. I have a huge document in front of me. Volcanium and I have been working on this relentlessly for the past day or so, just compiling everything that we can. I am going to read essentially from a script for this video just because I don't want to leave anything out. Normally with discussion videos, I'm just talking my free mind. I want to just give you guys an unfiltered opinion. This is way too fucking important for me, okay? As much as I like having discussion videos where I don't have to speak from a script, this is such an important topic to me personally that I want to have a script for it. I think this is a much bigger deal than a lot of people give it credit for. I know Nepessa said it very beautifully that this is not a victimless cheating scandal. Space hacking is not victimless. There are a ton of people who have been directly affected, and a lot of my friends were. And I hope that with this video, you guys can truly understand the scope of what has really happened and how many people's ambitions that have essentially been crushed. Because initially I wasn't going to make this video because, as I said, there's nothing I can say in a million years that's going to be any new information. Paco's video on the space hacking thing is great. Vortox's video is fantastic. All of that stuff. There isn't anything I can add to the conversation, and that's why I didn't want to make the video. However, I was speaking to Varium about it, and his raw emotion over the situation at hand because of how he was directly impacted himself really moved me to the point where I decided I have a big enough platform to where I can shine light on the people who truly deserve it. And that is my aim and goal for this video. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to every single person in the description. And of course, I'm going to be leaving a link to Volcanium as well for helping me compile all of this because there's a lot of stuff. But I hope you guys are going to be willing to sit through with this with me because I think this is very, very important to speak about. Before we start the video, do not go after space in any sense of the word. This is not to send hate towards space. This is simply a video I wanted to make to highlight the people who were directly affected. Please do not go on a witch hunt. I don't want that. I just want to bring some attention to the people who deserve the attention. To start chronologically, SpaceUK has infamously been the #1 player for a very long time, only recently being passed by Zoink after quitting the game, right? Spiritx, first and foremost, Spiritx is a player who has been in the top 5 spots for ages, and Spiritx very proudly claimed the #1 spot on the stats viewer, dethroning RG on October 27th, 2021. Space takes his #1 spot not even a week later, on November 3rd. After only being #1 for a week, Spiritx, who has been top 5 for a very long time, Spiritx has been a very reputable player for a very, very long time, loses his #1 spot to a hacker after Slaughterhouse gets placed at #1. Since that, Space was continuously #1 until Zoink passed him after he quit the game. And without Space, Spiritx would have been the #1 player for a couple months at least until the next player comes up. And you might be saying, well, 2 months isn't really that much, but I'm fairly certain personally, this is just my personal input, Spiritx would probably have been inclined to continue on grinding, fighting for his #1 spot, weren't it for the fact that he was immediately passed by someone who he probably viewed as just superior to him. Seeing someone rise as fast as Space when Spiritx has been continuously growing and grinding for years to just be passed a week after claiming the #1 spot, that is demotivating. That is incredibly rough to take in. You've been grinding for years just to be passed by someone who's been coming up for the past like 8 months. I am fairly certain that if Spiritx wasn't passed immediately after getting the #1 spot, he would have continued grinding on. That sort of motivation destroys you. Spiritx has since quit the game as well, which is incredibly disappointing to see. Very sad, all things considered. But I really wish Spiritx would have gotten his limelight for a little bit longer. Because how many even remember that Spiritx ever was #1 because he was there only for a week? And everyone's eyes at the time were on Space anyway because Space was rising and had just verified Slaughterhouse anyway. The next person to achieve #2, this is the era where Space was never passed, but people were #2 on the stats viewer, Crisis would have achieved #2 on the stats viewer on December 10th, 2021, only a short month after Space passed Spiritx as #1. meaning that Crysis could have claimed the number 1 spot at the end of 2021. And this would have made Crysis the first and only Icelandic player of all time to claim the number 1 spot, any of the leaderboards in GD. That includes Stars, Demons, Creator, anything. The only and first Icelandic player. But he wasn't, because he was cheated out of it. And icing on the cake for Crysis is that Crysis was essentially just a constant shadow of Space. He was known as the guy who couldn't pass Space. He was known as the number 2 because he was just never able to pass Space. He kept going for a very long time, but he just couldn't pass him. And that is rough. Being known as the guy behind Space when Space is outed as a hacker is a terrible feeling. Crysis is a good friend of Space. They have been friends for a very long time, but I'm fairly certain that it must sting knowing afterwards. I've spoken to Crysis, and he doesn't think Space is a bad person, but it's just, it sucks, man. Next up would be Wolves. We all know Wolves, the number 1, I have the most extreme demons in the game guy. You guys know him, right? Wolves achieved number 2 on the stats viewer after being one of the most consistent players in the top 5 for multiple years at this point. And sadly, it's kind of unclear when he got the number 2 spot. However, we do know that he got number 2 someday before May 10th, 2022, because some day before May 10th, some other guy passed him to get the number 2 spot for a little bit before he would pass him again. However, funnily enough, the Wolves did actually achieve top 1 for a little bit, because on June 17th, 2022, Space would be requested to be removed from the stats viewer for a short period of time, and he was temporarily number 1 for a little tiny bit, but he was never viewed that way, because subconsciously, the community knew that Wolves wasn't better than Space. Everyone knew that Space was better, or knew that Space was better. However, he wasn't at the top of the leaderboard, but he wasn't at the top in community consciousness because Space was removed willingly from the list, which just makes it even more bitter in my opinion. Thunder BT was, prior to him being a high caliber list grinder, he was more known for his insane mobile achievements, and his skills skyrocketed when he swapped to the PC version of the game. Thunder was one of the greatest mobile players of all time, but as he moved over to PC, he quickly became insanely good, and he ultimately surpassed Wolves on May 10th, 2022, making him the number 2 player on the stats viewer for a short duration of time before Wolves would pass him again. However, he would have been number 1, because as we all know, Space wasn't legitimate. Thunder was number 3 for a very long time, passed Wolves for a little short amount of time, but he never got that attention he would have gotten if he were to hit number 1 ever. Being number 1 is incredibly prestigious. So even if Thunder was only passed Wolves for a little short amount of time, probably like a month, that month would have meant a lot for a person that is so passionate about grinding the game. Lania Kea, formerly known as Jeller, we all know Jeller. Jeller is your favorite player's favorite player, is someone not really known outside of the top player community, but as I said, he's your favorite player's favorite player. However, he's silently become the best Korean player to probably ever touch the game, and he had that final push for the number 2 spot after beating Verdant Landscape, and he finally reached number 2 on July 13th, 2022, making him, technically speaking, the first Korean after Exotic and Lunar Sim roughly 7 years ago to be number 1 anywhere. YSJ did claim the top demon spot for a while, which is a lot more recent. Jeller was cheated out of one of the most prestigious titles, and the first time a Korean would have achieved this title, it's just crazy to think, because the Korean community is so incredibly passionate about this game, and Lania Kea, or Jeller, would never achieve this simply because of the fact that someone else was above him, and that one above him was a cheater. And I think it's kind of hurt for me personally, as someone who was very closely tied to the Korean community during Sari's reign, seeing the Koreans persevere as much as they have, for them to just never achieve the top spot on Pointer Crate because of a hacker is very disappointing. And he was number 2 for a very long time as well, because the next person to get number 2 wouldn't achieve number 2 until October 10th, 2022, which is a few months. Jeller would have been on top for several months, but the next person to achieve number 2 would have been Snowballer, after going on an absolute rampage, beating a lot of the top levels in a very short amount of time, which was incredibly impressive. He did it all on Twitch, over on his stream, and it was fascinating to watch. But to see him never achieve that number 1 spot, which he rightfully deserved after his incredible showcase of consistency and skill, is heartbreaking, because he, as well as many other of the Australian players, are incredibly passionate about this game. So seeing him never achieve this is rough. And Snowballer, subsequently as well, I would argue that if we remove Space from the equation, he would also potentially been nominated for Best Player of 2022, because he rightfully deserved it. He was one of the best players, but he just lost out because he wasn't the more popular player, and Space took up the final slot. Now, here is where I become incredibly passionate about this. These are the failed top 1 verifications. I'm going to be reading this pretty directly, but I want you guys to see it. I'm going to be leaving a link to the Discord messages for you guys to read for yourself if you want to, because these are very shortened up, but I do want to just speak about this very directly because I think it is very important. Varium, we all know Varium, verifier of minus drive, verifier of hard machine, states that it is very uncertain whether or not hard machine would have initially placed above Tartarus. However, what leads him to believe this is that the first four legitimate victors of hard machine all to this day think that hard machine is harder than Tartarus. And Varium believes that it was never initially placed above Tartarus because of space. Why does he think that? There were 4 people at the time who compared Tartarus to hard machine, so why wouldn't it place above it if one person thought Tartarus was harder? Opinions are very subjective and very prone to being swayed by a higher authority. Space at the time was already becoming incredibly well respected as a player, and he said the hard machine was barely harder than Zodiac, something which can very easily have swayed Dosha and Swooker's opinions. Because when you as a player think something about a level's difficulty based on your experience, which hard machine very much is. Hard machine is an experience-based level. The difficulty of hard machine comes from the fact that it is an awful experience of just dying to the same things over and over again. That is what makes it difficult. Having a better player say that that level is simply not that hard, it's very easy to lose your confidence in your stance on that topic. I'm gonna use a personal anecdote here real fast. I have the same feeling with Neutra. I was very adamant about the fact that Neutra was incredibly hard. I thought it was harder than hard machine. Not by much, but I thought it was harder than hard machine. And even to this day, I think it's way harder than stuff like Promethean, which is only like 3 spots below it, right? But when I hear so many people say that Neutra isn't that hard, or calling Neutra, like even some people calling it overrated, I feel incredibly uncertain in my own stance on it. I'm uncertain whether or not my opinion is correct. It's what I think is what I believe is true. However, seeing so many people just say otherwise who are better players than I am, it makes you doubt yourself. It makes you doubt yourself a lot. And that doubt is very rough. Why does that matter though? Like, why does it matter that Space's opinion swayed Swooker and Dosha to say that hard machine was easier than Tartarus initially? The thing that made me want to make this video initially is the reason. And it is because Space essentially robbed Varium of his ultimate goal. This is gonna be like, for those of you who aren't like deeply intimate within the community and deeply invested into playing this game as a whole, you might not understand this, but look at it from a perspective of something that you are truly passionate about, whether it is sports or a different video game or anything really. Varium, ever since the list's inception, back in the old GD forums, back when it was a forum page of the hardest levels and you clicked on it and it would scroll down a list of people who had beaten it, no point system, no nothing. He had looked up to the #1 level with admiration. He used it as a flagpole and a finish line for this is where I want to end up. Varium, for the past 7 years of playing, wanted to reach the top. He wanted to know what it felt like to beat the hardest level in the game, or even verify the hardest level in the game. Most preferably, verifying the hardest level in the game. His motivation to play and improve was the constant chase of reaching the very top. And to know that Space is the sole purpose for hard machine, not placing #1 initially and placing #5, let alone, it just fucking sucks. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It genuinely just fucking sucks. Imagine working tirelessly for years to achieve your goal just for that to be robbed away because of one person who had a higher authority and a more reliable opinion to steal that away from you. Obviously now, in hindsight, yeah, hard machine would have been #1, but that feeling of accomplishment of beating the hardest level in the game and verifying the hardest level in the game, he won't feel. He will not have that feeling with hard machine. Even though he knows deep down that hard machine would have been #1, he can't claim that accomplishment the same way as something that was actually placed #1 at the time will be. And I think that's horrible for him because he constantly wants to push to reach that top. But because of Space and Slaughterhouse, the curve of difficulty went exponential, and now it's an even harder thing to grasp. Minus Dry took him 9 months nearly. That placed #9. He still wants to chase that #1 spot that he was robbed from, but it is such a hard task at this point. He was fully capable of it, and he would have been capable of it back then, but now it is such an unrealistic goal to continuously chase. And it just sucks to know that you didn't reach your goal because of one person's illegitimacy. It sucks. It just straight up sucks. As for Firework, we all know Firework. Firework, haha, the funny haha, 2-second top 1 before Slaughterhouse was placed above it. I talked to Trick about it, and Firework to him was a promise to Vernum. He promised Vernum that he wanted to make it top 1. Trick at the time, he wasn't trusted. His hardest was not even close to Firework. And in his own words, he was just a kid with a big dream of being able to verify and gain that trust with Vernum and subsequently the community as a whole as well. He wanted to promise Vernum that he was able to verify the hardest level in the game. However, that promise was completely destroyed 5 days prior because Space verified Slaughterhouse 5 days before Trick's 1 year-long journey to verify Firework was finally completed, and his promise to Vernum would have been realized. As we'll talk a little bit about later in the video, Trick was actually invited to the Slaughterhouse race with Space, so he had played Slaughterhouse before it was verified. He made some okay progress, didn't play too much, but as a result, he started to believe that he would never have his top 1 because Slaughterhouse was, and I quote, way too hard. And after both of them were verified, he was preaching that Firework was the top 1, but he didn't do that in good faith. He didn't say Firework was top 1 because he thought Firework was top 1. He thought Slaughterhouse was the harder level, but he preached what he preached because he didn't want to be a disappointment to Vernum and to the community that he had promised to make Firework top 1. He didn't want to be a disappointment for not being able to keep his promise, and he felt like complete shit. Like, straight up, just complete and utter shit. He felt like a proper disappointment for falling short of his promise of verifying what was supposed to be the hardest level in the game. And after struggling for months, literally over a year, to verify, he wasn't able to feel accomplished or satisfied with himself with his achievement because of a cheater. He wasn't able or allowed to feel satisfied with himself for pulling through with one of the most impressive verifications of all time because of someone who cheated. You would think that after a year and over 200,000 attempts, you would feel satisfied and accomplished with it. The whole reason why he started to begin with was because he promised Vernum and Cherry to make it top 1, and he couldn't. He could not get that feeling of satisfaction simply because of one guy who decided, yeah, I'm just gonna macro this shit. And it's so aggravating to think about, knowing that he went and constantly bashed himself and was constantly angry and disappointed of himself because of a lie that made him lose out on his dream of verifying the hardest level. I want to give a little bit of credit. Trick said himself that it is not all negative because his feelings of anger and frustration did lead to a massive spike in motivation to improve at the game. Trick has since become one of the best players in the game and is currently one of the top players on the stats viewer. But I think that sort of motivation is such a double-edged sword in a way. I feel like it shouldn't come from such a deep-rooted feeling of anger and frustration with yourself. Yes, it is Space that caused him to spiral and become that angry with himself, but being angry of yourself because of someone else verifying a level harder than something you'd been working on for a long time, it just feels awful. He would have been the verifier of the top 1 demon, Firework, but he was robbed of it because Space hacked a harder level a week earlier. A year's worth of time and effort just to be robbed out of it 5 days prior by a hacker, and it's such a gut-wrenching feeling. And that lasted for a long time as well. His anger towards himself lasted for a very long time. Next up, we're going to be doing the first Victor titles that were stolen. These are just the levels that he claimed to be first, but wasn't. And I want to give a little bit of a showcase of the things that he stole from other people. First off, he stole True Effect, first Victor of True Effect from Laniakea, or Jeller. And despite Laniakea being a playtester for the significantly harder version, making the first title Victor Space claimed even more insane looking back at it, him sniping first Victor is absolutely crazy. Next up, Firework. Crisis would have been the real first Victor of Firework. Crisis was incredibly mind-blocked with it. He spent a very long time on it. It was by far his most egregious grind. He was working on beating the then number 2, which would have been the number 1, kinda. Doggy beat Slaughterhouse before he beat Firework, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I digress. Space claimed the first Victor title of Firework November 20th, 2021, and Crisis would beat it a whole month later on December 24th, 2021, meaning that Space beat the number 2 demon a month before anyone else was able to do so, leaving Crisis in the dust because a first Victor title of that magnitude for Crisis would have been huge. But the first Victor title of Firework was just nothing because it was beaten so fast by Space. Next up is unnerfed Aerial Gleam, or the original version before it was nerfed. This one's crazy to me because first Victor title was stolen by 2 minutes, as Soink beat it 2 minutes after Space did. He supposedly beat the level as quickly as it did because he was an invested playtester in Aerial Gleam before he got handed to Doggy to verify. However, Zoink losing out on the first Victor title because of a 2-minute time difference of Space being first, absolutely unreal, especially considering this was before Zoink's like real come up. Like Zoink was starting to create a name for himself, but he lost out on this one for that. Oblivion, the first real victor of Oblivion, would be Skizzle, and it was stolen away from Skizzle, who had been playing the level for almost a month before it even got raided, which I think makes his a lot worse. Skizzle wanted to beat the level and wanted to be the first victor of it before it even got raided because he truly liked the level, and he nearly beat it. He got 82 and 26 to 100. And what's interesting is that Space was a past verifier of Oblivion, which made the speed of which he supposedly beat the level more believable to a lot of people, because he had about, or allegedly he had about 60% on a harder version, so he just sniped Skizzle out of it right after the level got raided, just because. That's really just the reason, just because. Skizzle had been working on it for such a long time just to be sniped out of it immediately after the level got raided. It must feel awful. It must feel awful. Terrible. Abyss of Darkness, the first real victor, would have been Trick. There wasn't really a huge build-up for this title, unlike the previously mentioned levels. However, Trick would have been robbed out of the first victor title, which generally generates a lot more views for a level this hard. Losing him a lot of exposure. It's not to say that Trick isn't like a huge player. However, I still feel like it's worth to mention that Trick do deserve the title of first victor for Abyss of Darkness. And of course, everyone knows this one. Acheron, the first real victor, would have been Doggy. Doggy just didn't get what he deserved. He really didn't. He spent 120,000 attempts to be robbed out of first victor on the current hardest level in the game by a guy who claimed to beat it in 40,000. It's such a gut punch, dude. It is such a gut punch to the people who truly deserve what they did. And I think these first victor titles all really showcase what he did towards them. And I think I know I'm a broken record at this point, but it just sucks, man. It really just does suck. Because first victor is a very coveted title. A lot of people do want to be first victor of stuff. I know a lot of people who put themselves through a ton of stress to become the first victor of levels they truly love. Take Skizzle or Crisis or Doggy sitting through so much just to be number 2 and probably never getting the recognition they deserve for being number 1 just blows. And lastly, the Slaughterhouse Verification race. I'm going to be going over it very quickly because there isn't that much to it, in all honesty, because it was so short-lived. A handful of people were giving copies of Slaughterhouse by Ice Cave to race the verification of it, which ended up in Space winning their race. However, there were others who were legitimately playing the level who made decent progress on the level who were robbed of the title of possible verifier. Obviously, now we are going to call Doggy the rightful verifier of Slaughterhouse because he was the first victor of it. However, as he said in his video, which you guys can watch, I'm going to link it in the description, considering he holds the level dear to his heart, didn't really think he would ever have the title, and having it just randomly given to him isn't the same level of satisfaction. It doesn't feel the same. With the knowledge we have now, it is safe to say that there could have been an entirely different verifier, because verification races are very different. When someone else verifies a level, you kind of lose motivation to play that level, because when you can't have your name attached to a level anymore, your inclination to grind the level just isn't there anymore. It isn't as important for you to continuously grind to be the verifier because you can't have your name attached to it. Being first victor, it's awesome. It feels great, but it doesn't attach to your name the same way a verification does. If I were the first victor of Nutra, it wouldn't be known as an Aeon level. It's the Aeon level because I'm the verifier of it. So the verifier could have very well ended up being Doggy, who is now the verifier. It could have been Trick, it could have been Zanny, it could have been Curse, it could have been Swooker, or any of the other people who were in the race. Those are the main players who were trying to make progress on it. However, no one really made substantial progress on it in the race because Space beat it in like a week and a half, which is absolutely crazy. And I personally believe that weren't Space to hack it between these 5 players, the race would have been much tighter and it would have been much more hype. It would have been an incredibly cool and exciting race to watch within the community. Watching people race to be the verifier of Slaughterhouse would have been one of the coolest things to witness. But we never really got that because Space hacked Slaughterhouse and verified it super quickly. Yes, the level reached magnitudes. It was such a huge deal within the community. But imagine if we got something as exciting as watching Bloodlust being verified or Yatagarasu or Bloodbath happen with Slaughterhouse, watching someone grind it out live for months on end, multiple people even, to see the hype build up around it. That would have been so genuinely awesome. We didn't get it. We didn't get that because someone macroed it in the background in a week and a half, and it's just disappointing. It's really disappointing. And to end off, I want to quickly talk a little bit about what I think is the biggest overall effect and impact of this whole situation. And one thing that bothers me a lot, it is the destruction. Okay, that's a little bit dramatic, isn't it? It's basically irreversible damage done to the integrity of this game as a whole. And what I mean by that is that this game is very much built on trust. Yes, we require so much proof to claim someone's legitimacy. If someone says that they've beaten a level and they don't have a recording of it, you write it off as illegitimate, right? But this proves that it's so easy to get away with hack, because I want to say that what Space did was absolutely ridiculous in the sense that it is such a stupid way to hack that anyone with 5 brain cells can get away with. This proves to me that you can't trust anyone within this community. And I think that is the most damning part of this all. Because as much as I want to believe and trust in the players who put in so much time and effort, I can't with a hand on my heart say that I can believe in anyone's legitimacy, because it is so easy to get away with. Hacking is 100% undetectable if you are even remotely good at it. Space was caught because of his own negligence. Space was caught because he just didn't care to try and use any proper method. He just used a macro and gave the bare minimum of proof. And that was enough for him to get away with it for 2 whole years. I don't think we can go back to a time now where people can genuinely believe and trust in someone else's legitimacy because of how easy it is to hack. And I think that is the most depressing part. Subsequently, because of this, it's hard to believe in the demon list as well. I'm a huge defender of the demon list. I think the demon list does a very, very good thing for the community. It is a huge part of why the game has been pushed as far as it has been, and I think it is a very massive player in the deeper GD community. I chose to get banned from the demon list for my own personal reason, not because I actually think the demon list as an entity is a bad thing. But I can't trust that they're going to be able to catch hackers at all. It's really hard to put trust in a system that can't catch something as trivial as this. Obviously, you can boil it down to, oh, but this person and that person. But when you think about the fact that Space has been hacking ever since the Golden, it's so tough to just believe in anything anymore on their part. I want to believe in the demon list because I want to believe that they do a good job, but it's just not possible anymore. And I think that's the biggest thing to come out of this on a grand scale. On personal levels, everything that I've talked about up until this point has been absolutely horrible and feels gut-wrenching. But at this point, I just don't think the community will be the same at a trust level. Can you trust anyone in this game when Space hacked in front of his friends for years? In voice calls, he would screen share his progress on levels in call with his friends, and he still hacked and wasn't caught until years later. Can you truthfully believe that anyone is legit anymore? No, and I don't think that we will ever be able to. And I think that is horrible. It just feels bad, you know? As someone who has so much passion and love for this community and playing as a whole, it just sucks. And it just makes me angry that no matter what, you basically just have to just take people's word for it. But there will always be an asterisk there. There will always be an asterisk to someone's legitimacy. And I think it's awful. I hate it. And it makes me unreasonably angry because I love this game and I love its community. Hopefully you guys took anything from this. Please show love and support to the people that I've talked about in this video. I would really appreciate it, and I will see you guys later. Thank you for all the support. This is a very long video, but I do think that it deserves to be spoken about because this is something that I think is very important to discuss, and I think it is a very important thing for the community to take at face value. And I think people should give some support to the people who deserve it that were robbed because of the situation. I'll see you guys around. Adrian South, I had to really think for making my day better. Hope yours a little bit better too, and I'll see you guys later.